Hello, and it's back to some live recording. I'm not entirely certain if we're not going to get invaded by kids or something like that, so brace yourselves. The kids are home, but it's not because the schools are closed, school, and therefore those are still going in Sweden. This is, however, um, the påsklov, the spring break for Sweden. So the kids are all home. I think we're all getting a little crispy because, and I see this in my friends here too. Even though it's just the ordinary winter break, things are a little tense. And the kids are definitely, because the kids aren't doing a whole lot of their other things. They're not going to their main activities due to the generally voluntary, um, if not shut down, at least tone down of most of the kids' activities. Some of them continue. Some of the people will probably be a little bit shocked, first of all, that they're going back to their primary schools on Monday. Second, that activities like dance classes and things like that are continuing. Most people, if I am not mistaken, are uh, practicing, like at schools, they sit farther apart than they did before. But you can tell people are making some difficult choices. The last 2 weeks in school have been underattended, and I strongly doubt that most of the parents in question have said, "Oh, gee, my kid is kind of sniffly. I think they'll stay home," which is what they're allowed to do. I strongly suspect that a little bit of elective identification of my kids not staying, my kids not going. I suspect a little bit of that is going on. And the same thing for a lot of the activities, which are nominally being held, but it's clear that not everybody is going. As far as the famous social distancing is concerned, where I live, you can see it. People are walking far apart from one another. Everyone's joking that, well, Sweden, everyone's social distancing anyway. And there's kind of a funny cartoon going around of showing a bus stop before and after social distancing has been recommended. And of course, they look exactly the same. As though everybody's already standing, way far apart and not interacting. This is kind of true. The beloved self-image of Swedes as kind of these shy, awkward, distanced people, kind of stoically staring in different directions, even like in family gatherings, let alone public ones. It's kind of true. It's not really very true. Take it from me. Everybody comes up and freaking talks to me out of nowhere, just like they always did in the States. And when people in Sweden do something that is fairly close packed, they're just as chummy or more so physically than, as anybody else. So all the places where you would be concerned about social distancing, which is to say shopping, bathing, a public pool, basically gathering for food or restaurants or foot traffic in general, they're no more distanced than anyone else. And so all of those are visibly different. People are being much more careful. Public transit is deserted in comparison. My wife commutes to Stockholm, and it is extremely bare on that train. So you can tell, people are doing this. A lot of people are voluntarily staying home from work. A lot of employers are basically cutting back on who's there when. So even without the government mandates to do so, people are doing that stuff. Now, the question is it enough? And of what they're doing compared to it being mandated? And then the second scarier question is doing that, even to a fairly maximal level, is that enough? By enough, we mean, of course, the famous flattening the curve or whatever is the right model for basically less people get sick. And so, well, frankly, I'm a little pessimistic, and yet again, I completely fail my desire for these Friday Live features to be, this guy. Look what we got this week. That I can't even be that guy at all, let alone now. I'm worried. I live in Östergötland, which is the non-urban region of Sweden that's hit most hard by COVID-19, and people I know have been hospitalized. Nobody I know has died yet here, but people in Stockholm and Göteborg, two biggest cities, they are definitely in that zone where people they know have either died or have been extremely close to dying. For those of you who don't know, and not to be too scary, the fatalities in COVID-19 may certainly occur due to pneumonia and other forms of respiratory distress, but in which case, ventilation is critical. But that story does not end there. There are immune effects, which are severe and account for why somebody under, careful and knowledgeable care, why somebody will die very quickly. So without some better assurance, understanding, therapies for that, which we kind of don't have, and I don't mean because we're deprived of the equipment, I mean because it's not really medically, well known. It's not medically well understood, how to deal with a cytokine storm. So anyway, you find me a little bit, darker and more dubious than I might be. I'm not thrilled with the Swedish policy. I'm scared about my kids going back to school. One of the reasons is what I've talked about before. I'm not really interested in the classic pandemic situation where the sick people are infecting the well people. That I cannot get anybody out of that mindset. They all seem to be real. Okay, if you're sick, then you can infect people. So as long as we keep people from being sick, we'll be fine. We'll just keep that, in place. If what we know or what we think about this particular strain is true, that it persists on surfaces for a considerable amount of time, yes, you see people with gloves now, and you see a few people masked up, and that's fine. But the fact is, those prevent personal infection. They don't prevent transporting contacts to a new location. So you could do that if you're not sick. And that's probably, if it persists on surface like we're told, that's probably why it gets everywhere. And that's why it will jump checkpoints. You can stop people at a border all you want to, but the use of objects will simply transfer it rapidly across. And it is traveling basically more than you are sick or well. So with that in mind, and with the failure of the most critical, the failure of medical ability to deal with the most critical acute threat from having it, I'm real worried. I really don't want to go into the zone where I'm going to have a list of bodies that I remember, let alone anything more dire for me or my family. And I'm choosing not to be too dreadful to my friends in the U.S. at the moment, because I'm pretty sure you're already, thinking in these terms. So anyway, I am a little concerned. I would, okay, let's see. So the big question seems to be, what do you think of Sweden's policy? Well, I think Sweden's policy is too light. I also think that what people think of as the more severe policies are not really hitting the right point. As I mentioned in a previous video, the right point to hit is the transfer from surface to surface by people, whether the people are sick or well. And that doesn't really seem to be entering, the dialogue. I never hear that brought forward in a policy dialogue the way it should be. And similarly, I think that, as I've also mentioned a little bit, people are sort of culturally too trusting in the word immunity. For one thing, no, it is not true that once you have X, that after that you're immune to X. That is much more variable phenomena than people think. And also, it varies greatly from disease to disease, let alone from person to person within a disease. And it's really not the resistance that we're talking about that you get from having contracted the disease is really not something that you want to put your public policy on top of. That's very different from a situation where you can increase resistance medically through a vaccination. Under those circumstances, then yes, getting everybody far more resistant as quickly as you can. You don't even need to get everybody. As long as you hit a certain critical amount, then everybody is protected, and that's great. But that's only if you have a reliable way for the resistance to the disease to jump up per person. And as of yet, we cannot rely on that. We have no evidence that this is really clearly the case for this. So until then, the only thing to do is to keep the transfer from surface to surface low. So anyway, I'm repeating myself from the past ones, and I'm being depressing too. This is no good. Nobody's going to follow me on Fridays if they slump off with their their heads hanging and their hands hanging and go, oh. All right, what are we going to talk about that's a little bit more fun, a little bit more inspiring? Well, first of all, I will say that it is quite fascinating always to go through the major holidays here in Sweden. And this is the talking to people who don't live here. And the people who live here are going to be irritated that, here I am talking about them like I know something. But like most places, and this includes the States, remember, I have an academic career, and I have always been surrounded by people insisting that they are not religious people, that they are not like some other culture or some other subsector of a culture where they, those people are religious. Well, I'm not, they say. I know I've heard all of the excuses. Oh, that's not religion, it's culture, but I don't personally believe blah, 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 blah. When it is the dead of winter and y'all go into the graveyard in the dead of night, I might add, holding candles, and everybody is really, really quiet, and they walk up and down the graveyards talking to the dead. When you do that every year, okay, that's religion, okay? So it's really cool to see how powerful that is in Sweden. I just described an actual holiday, because the Nordic countries, they do holidays right. I mean, you've seen the cartoons, about their Santa. Basically, he's the devil, and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool. Easter is very similar. At the intersections of most of the places through the town, the holidays or the different seasons and stuff get different statues or little displays and stuff like that. So during Christmas, there's a great big, a great big construct of the traditional triangular candles that they use here in Sweden. So then there's different arrangements or different designs you can have for them. And then there'll be giant ones, at the intersections and roundabouts. Well, in Easter, Påsk, there's there are these, I guess they're chicks. They're made of twigs. And so they're basically, big chicks, but they're enormous. They're like humongous, above your head, towering, puffballs of twigs with little faces and beaks stuck in them, and little flowers kind of stuck around them in random. And they're always in groups. So there's like 2 or 3 of them. And so there's these giant, kind of monster chicks at every one of these intersections that you drive by. And they're really cute, and they're also kind of otherworldly. And that's really very kind of Swedish for Easter. The tradition of kids dressing up and going door to door and getting candy. Halloween has recently come to Sweden, and because Halloween's a great party, kind of the only U.S. holiday I like. The Swedes have kind of adopted it, and it ties into pop culture and stuff like that. That's really big here, and so it's kind of a shame because it's overtaken and replaced the Easter version, which is traditional Swedish and is very, very similar. The kids dress up as, the Swedish witches, which is a specific look. You put freckles on your face and you dress in a particular period, and you go from door to door, basically, kind of tacitly threatening that you're going to hex the house if they don't give you candy. So it's really, really similar, but hardly anybody does it anymore. It's really a shame because Halloween has come along, basically. Other Easter stuff. Well, it is the biggest holiday. Americans probably I guess I don't want to patronize anybody. Easter is bigger than Christmas, okay? And Christian thing. And so you have days and days and days. So there's the spring break, which is the Easter break. Nothing special there. And there's the big Sunday, which is nothing special there. In terms of, it's very special in terms of culture. People will travel a lot. They'll make time and go to get together with family and friends for Easter. You sort of schedule your year partly around it here. And there's also the follow-up holiday, which I knew nothing about. I've never seen it mentioned or observed in the States, which is basically when Jesus goes up to heaven. That's Ascension. There are probably sects or groups in the States who do observe and celebrate it, but it's not a publicly discussed or known moment. Basically in the States, he goes up to heaven and everyone knew what was going to happen, so they didn't really talk about it. Here, it's a whole holiday. It's also the first kind of reliable sunny week in Sweden. So it's the big break. It's the big getaway after winter and after kind of recovering from the winter and getting your house a little ungrungy, turning over your gardens and stuff like that, setting up your new activities with your kids, getting the new routine going. And then this particular holiday hits and everybody goes to their getaway, whether they have a cabin somewhere or whether it's off to the seashore or any number of things. Anywhere that you go to just do a weekend getaway, boom, everybody goes. So this year is a little sad for this socially because people are not, traveling on mass transit in big groups to go crisscross, one another's paths all through Sweden in order to go get with their family and stuff so that they can do påsk. Nor will they in a little while, nor will they go zipping off to where they want a vacation over and that's a little bit later. That's in May, I think. But the point is that it's not going to happen, and that's very sad. So hopefully a little bit of screen time will make up for it, but it won't be the same. Now, here's the other cool thing about Easter and Christmas here is Must. Must is a caramel cola, which doesn't really taste like Coke. It's more caramelly and a little more, the classic soft drinks that all of us are familiar with. If you've ever had real root beer, real sarsaparilla or something like that, and they've got kind of this tonic effect. Not too terrible tasting, but definitely you're drinking a root beer. Well, anyway, Påsk is a little bit like that. It is real sugary sweet. They dump a lot of sugar in there. Cane sugar, definitely. So you have that, and the point is that you get Julmust comes in the stores in December, and Påskmust comes into the stores in April. It's the same. And everybody knows, and it's kind of a joke. There's sort of a joke of, all right, well, they've got the leftover Julmust, so now just going to wrap the label around the bottle, and it's going to be Påskmust. And so that's probably true. I confess I really like it. I'm like a kid for that stuff. It's like, ooh, Påskmust. They've got the Påskmust. Let's go out and get some, so go figure. All right. I hope that was minor, semi-charming. It's been a long chit-chat. You've been listening to me for way too long. These are supposed to be short and fun and make everybody want to run off and watch other videos by me because I'm so charming. But I don't know if that's going to happen ever. But probably, if it does, it won't be today. I'll be more cheerful later. Let's all work toward the possibility of it being more cheerful later for everybody. So you know what to do. Take care.